Oh man, I feel so sorry for all you kids out there that weren't able to see Logan but instead were taken to see this. You all have my pity. For those of you that don't know, Beauty and the Beast is my favourite Disney animated film, and the live action movie was just recently released, and today we are going to find out which one is superior. Let's get to it. I'm going to do something a little different this time. I'm going to assume that you all know the story of Beauty and the Beast, and instead I'm going to focus on the changes the movie did and see if they were necessary or not. Now, the story in the animated movie is perfect. It's very tight, cut straight to the point, and doesn't have any filler. Now, the movie on the other hand decided to add additional elements to the story. For example, the movie opens with the exact same narrated story about the Enchantress and the Beast, although this time, instead of it being told via a patterned window, it is reenacted with actors. And it was nowhere near as nicely told or therapeutic as the animated version. Now, I don't mind the story being told differently, but this was just a disaster. I mean, the narrator tells a story about the Enchantress revealing herself and the prince begging for forgiveness, but you don't see that being reenacted by the actors. As a result, this whole scene didn't synchronize or connect with the narration, and it just felt disjointed. What was meant to be a nice, simple scene was turned into a complete mess, and instead of being drawn into the story, it leaves you questioning the film's competence. Next, oh forget it, I'm just gonna cut to the chase. The story unfolded like shit throughout this entire movie. It is so copy and paste to the point that it seems to follow the logic that if the cartoon did it, then we should do it. To hell with why the cartoon did it, we'll just do it. And that alone is a poison that festers throughout this entire movie's narrative. The events in the cartoon felt natural and happened more or less organically. In the movie, it feels like the characters were forcefully written into these situations and the outcomes feel completely rigged. And excluding the natural character progression really sucks out all the humanity these characters are supposed to have, and as a result, it makes this movie feel dull. And what's funny is that the film boosts the colors, adds a lot of brightly colored CGI, and constantly accompanies all of this with background music, and somehow, it still feels dull and lifeless. Seriously, this film just feels like a visual and audible reenactment of the scenes from the cartoon, and it misses everything that made them so special. Also, the animated version uses time effectively and efficiently, whereas the movie severely compromises the pacing by adding a ton of padding, and unbelievably, the padding creates plot holes. Let's start with Belle. Damn, where do I start? Now, when Emma Watson was cast to play Belle, unlike the majority of people, I thought she was miscast. But I was willing to give her a chance. I mean, after Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe did a good job in The Woman in Black, and Emma Watson did... Okay, I have never seen her in anything after the final Harry Potter movie, but this is basically her chance to prove herself to audience members like myself that outside of the Harry Potter franchise, she can act. And she has yet to prove it. I mean, my god, she was terrible in this. She had no charm, her singing instead of sounding nice and organic sounded auto-tuned like crazy, and her relationship with all the characters didn't feel genuine. In many ways, this movie makes me see the hidden passion and genius the animators had for the original, because in the very first scene where Belle is just walking through the village, there is a lot of personality in the way she moves. You can kind of see why people look at her as unusual. When Emma Watson is walking through the village, I see nothing, except a dull expression on her face that rarely seems to go away, and she seems very indifferent to the rest of the village, and that makes this song the villagers sing about her seem out of place. Why are they singing about her? There is nothing that makes her different from the rest of the village, yet for some reason everyone persists on bragging about her because she can read or something, and consequentially it makes Belle dull. In the cartoon, Belle wasn't just different because she could read, it was also because her characteristics were different, as were her interactions with the village. Because of this, everyone saw her as an outsider. In the live-action version, she just walks around with that same monotone expression. Even to the biggest lowlives, there's nothing about her worth gossiping about. Now it's time to talk about the Beast. Now before I talk about him, I must talk about his appearance. And I got flack for talking about how crap he looked in my trailer impression, but unfortunately, I was 100% right. He looks like shit. I mean seriously, there was not just one moment where I just stopped and admired his design. I recently compared Kong Skull Island to the 2005 King Kong, and 12 years after its release, I am still admiring the CGI with his amazing and natural looking facial expressions, and it is downright pitiful that a movie from 12 years ago looks night and day superior to this. And it absolutely puzzles me that it looks this bad, because in the Dawn of the Planet of the Apes movie from 2014, the CGI team had to create hundreds of apes and they all look unique and are able to express themselves in various different ways. But not in here. They do such a terrible job to make the Beast expressive and sympathetic to the point that they actually give him a song to sing after Belle leaves the castle to express how sad he is. And this was completely pointless because the cartoon did it so well in just a few seconds with a couple of contemplating looks, a few sentences, a couple of sad faces, and a final roar as Belle leaves the castle with a bit of dramatic music added for good measure. It was beautifully done. In the live action version, it was just laughable. Beauty and the Beast had only one big CGI creature to create that takes priority over all the others, and still he ends up looking like shit. And as for his personality, it was basically everything from the cartoon, but performed with much less care. The only good bonding moments he had with Belle was when they were reading, but that was just 2 very short scenes. Apart from that, everything about him was unbelievably unimpressive. This remake also proves that the director did not even understand the original movie. For example, in the cartoon we are shown that one day the Beast is at an all-time low, and disgusted with his appearance he rips his own portrait. Simple enough. However, in the live action movie, they show him turn into the Beast, and right after his transformation, out of nowhere, he immediately rips his portrait. It had an express meaning in the animated version, but the movie does it purely as a visual reference. You see how messed up this is? Even the smaller things that should be straightforward and simple are somehow misrepresented. Also, the scene where the Beast saves Belle from the wolves was a complete joke. Even the accompanying music was complete crap during that scene. Heck, even the very next scene where she attends to his wounds and they talk to each other was garbage. I'm not kidding, I have seen better arguments reenacted in school plays. So they failed with the Beauty, and they failed with the Beast. Is there any point in going on? If you couldn't tell, the main characters were far better in the animated version. Now, as far as the writing goes, Gaston is not as repulsive or dumb in this movie, so when Belle rejects him, you don't fully understand why like in the cartoon. In the cartoon, he is a narcissist and embodies all the characteristics of one, so it's understandable why she would be repelled by him. In the live-action version though, he was actually a gentleman towards her. Now, as far as acting goes, Luke Evans is passable as Gaston. He clearly is trying, and when he's opposite Emma Watson, he suddenly becomes the best actor in the movie. However, he is lacking 3 pivotal things that prevent him from properly being Gaston. He needs to be more stern, built, and grand. Everything about him seems underplayed, both physically and vocally. If he resolved that, then he would be a great Gaston, but unfortunately, he is just passable. Next up is Lefou. Now, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. Disney decided to make him gay in this movie, and that was a misguided decision. Now, viewers, and especially critics, seem to be so caught up in defending the fact that he's gay that they don't stop to question why he's gay. And the reason they don't is because their mind immediately goes to the common argument, oh, people don't complain about a story with bestiality, but they have a problem with someone who is gay. Well, that argument is complete nonsense. We, the audience, know that the Beast is not really an animal, he's a man. In the very opening scene, the film tells you that he's cursed, and thus he still has the same intelligence as a human, so he's not just a mindless animal. So no, this is not bestiality, this is fantasy, and something we know is fake, and thus does not reflect our reality. Now with Lefou, there is no reason for him to be gay, and adding this trait really makes him feel out of place. Now I know what you're thinking, Eric, you unbelievably handsome dimwit. How can he feel out of place when this movie has talking kitchenware and dancing furniture? Well, all of that takes place in the Beast's castle, which is enchanted and meant to be fictional, whereas the village is meant to reflect and represent the real-life time period of the time, albeit with more singing. And in this time period, homosexuality was far beyond illegal. It was inconceivable. So to add a modern-day concept into an old time zone really breaks the setting, and it completely took me out of the movie. So no, I thought it was a downright stupid addition for the studio to include, and it makes a once great and beloved character stand out like a sore thumb whenever he's on screen. And he felt like he didn't belong. And this causes immediate ramifications to his performance, as he switches so frequently to being gay that he spends next to no time encompassing the characteristics of Lefou. There were only 2 moments, not scenes, moments where I can recall he played the character somewhat. He wasn't good, but I could kind of see and hear tiny fragments of Lefou's personality, but once he started acting gay again and was prancing around like a prat, he lost all sense of the character. The animated movie invented these characters and nailed their characteristics. All the ornaments in the animated movie were memorable, had very distinct personalities, and they all had the perfect amount of screen time. They knew when to take center stage and when to get out. In the live-action movie, however, the house ornaments intrude and hog Belle's time with the Beast, and every time that happens, the character development suffers. Why Disney changed it, I don't know, but whatever the reason, it failed because there is no chemistry between Belle and the objects, and it was just wasted time that she could have spent more productively with the Beast. Now, all the ornaments were average at best, with the exception of Cogsworth, played by Ian McKellen. He is the only actor in this movie that sounds like he is putting in the most effort and energy to his vocal performance. Everyone else, however, is just reading lines. The worst of them all, though, was Mrs. Potts, voiced by Emma Thompson. Now, I thought she was a perfect casting choice, and I still do, but everything she says has next to no personality, and she speaks way too slow. And that's what killed her character for me, and it even killed the Beauty and the Beast song, which she could have sung perfectly. Seriously, if she spoke at a normal pace, sprinkled with a bit of humanity, then I would have zero problems with her. But somehow, all the cards were in her favor, and she still lost. Now, that being said, even though I didn't really like them, the ornaments did have the best scene in the movie. At the end of the climax, when they were turning into real objects, the scene suddenly gave me the feels, and it incorporated the original Beauty and the Beast soundtrack incredibly well. If the whole ending was as good as this, then it would have been a tearjerker, but unfortunately, it didn't even come close to accomplishing that. So again, the side characters were far superior in the animated version. The songs, although practically the same length, feel longer for some reason. In the animated version, they are fast-paced and go by very quickly, but in the movie, despite being done by the same team, feel sluggish and don't have the same energy and charm to them. They just feel like poor imitations. The whole ballroom scene in particular was so lazily done. It lacked any creativity and the dancing looked so silly. The new songs were also crap. They feel like something out of a completely different movie and they didn't fit. Also, the segues to the songs are so incredibly jarring. The Be Our Guest song came shit out of nowhere and it didn't feel earned. And something you'll notice about the songs is that they made perfect sense for the characters in the cartoon, but the movie has changed certain character elements, and because of that, the songs no longer make sense anymore. For example, in this song, Belle says that the beast is dear and so unsure, and that was a fitting description. She is starting to realize that he seems very uncertain and uneducated. In the movie, however, he's actually a lot more intelligent than he is in the cartoon, so that means this version isn't unsure, and because of that, this song no longer describes the beast in the movie anymore, and that's just one example. So with regards to the songs, they really are disappointing, and I expected them to be far better than what they ended up as. And believe it or not, but the day after I saw this in the cinema, The Flash, which is one of my favourite shows of all time, had a one-off musical episode with a low budget of a TV show, and the actors that were singing in it sounded far more natural and experienced than the Beauty and the Beast cast. There is no sadder note to end this segment on than that. This makes me feel even more grateful for the animated Beauty and the Beast because in many ways, the live-action Beauty and the Beast is a very strong reminder as to what the animated version could have been if it wasn't made with such care. Now, I went into this movie with the lowest of expectations as I possibly could, with the hopes that I would end up enjoying it on a fundamental level. But somehow, it was even shittier and more cynical than I expected, and I didn't think that was possible. The sets were nice, albeit incredibly hit and miss, and the cinematography was decent, but when you notice such basic structural problems with the story and such poor performances, then those few good things don't amount to anything. It's time for the scores. The original Beauty and the Beast gets a 10 out of 10, and the live-action crapfest gets a 2. Why a 2? Well, because it's really pitiful that this film had a perfect template to work off of, and still it turned out to be a piece of crap. At the very least, this movie should have been good, but the fact that it was worse than the super low expectations I set is absolutely criminal. And funnily enough, my younger sister watched this with me, and she hated it more than I did. That is some feat, Disney. So thank goodness that's over with. In the comments below, I want you to tell me what you thought of the live-action Beauty and the Beast. Whether you agreed, partly agreed, or completely disagreed with me, I'll be really interested to read what you have to say. Also, I do have a Patreon page, and if you want to have early access to my videos, as well as have scheduled monthly Skype chats with me, then feel free to donate, and I'll be in contact with you shortly after. If you give this video a thumbs up and share it, I will really appreciate that too. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and I will catch all of you next time. Take care.